All right, it is 12:30, so we are going to go ahead and get started with today's WebEx. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about macronutrients and some of the information that comes along with those and importance in making sure that we're monitoring those as well as our daily calories when we are tracking our food. So this is not an all-encompassing informational on macronutrients. There's a lot of information on them. I am not a registered dietitian, so this is an overview. I cannot give individual recommendations as far as a direct diet for anyone. So again, this is just information that I have that I know with these, um, and information that I'll be sharing with you guys as we go throughout this presentation. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. So again, our topic today is understanding macronutrients. So we'll get into this. Macronutrients are nutrients we need in larger quantities that provide the body with energy. And the big three macronutrients that we focus on in terms of our daily calorie intake are carbohydrates, fat, and protein. Now there's other ones, there's other ones involved as well, but these are our main three that are focused on and what we're going to be talking about today. We'll start with carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are naturally occurring sugars, starches, and fibers that are found in food. They are broken down by the body into glucose or sugar, which is then used for energy. So again, consuming too many carbs, with that being broken down into glucose, what is not used for energy is typically stored in fat. So we want to make sure that we are managing the amount of carbohydrates we consume. We also want to make sure we're consuming good carbohydrates versus bad carbohydrates. So not all carbs are created equally. Good carbs consist of whole grain, high fiber foods that take longer for the body to break down, which provides a larger energy source. So you're getting more out of those carbs. Whole grain breads and cereals, vegetables and fruits are some examples of good carbs. And there are more than that, but again, that's just a brief example of some of those. Bad carbs are foods that contained refined carbohydrates with a low fiber content. So a lot of white flour and sugar, those are the prime examples. Anything that's been modified, if you think about flour, flour is enriched and bleached. So going for a whole grain fiber or a whole grain flour, if you can find it, if you do a lot of baking, is a great way to replace some of those bad carbs. Enriched flours, again, they're refined. They're found in foods like white bread, cakes, cookies, and other bakery items. So again, it's a high carb content, high sugar content, low nutritional value with a lot of those foods. A lot of cereals and some rice also contain refined carbs. So you've got to really make sure you're looking at nutrition labels when you're picking these things out. Um, bread is a big one. There are a lot of people who say they don't like whole wheat bread because they just prefer white bread. I believe you can find white whole wheat bread. I don't quote me on that, but it is much better for you. It is one little change you can make right there if you're a regular white bread eater to make the switch to whole wheat, which is what I consume and what I actually have grown to prefer. I didn't always prefer it, but I grew to enjoy it more than white breads. So you again want to go for whole grain, high fiber foods instead of enriched low fiber foods. Longer energy source provided. They're going to help you feel fuller, so a higher fiber content will help you to feel more full, so you're not feeling like you want to eat all the time. I mean, if you think a lot of snacky foods, those are also poor quality carbohydrates. So you think about chips, if you think about things like that, you're not getting much out of those foods. So you want to have foods that are going to work for you. Continuing with carbohydrates, again, just a little chart here that compares some good versus bad carbs, and this is not, again, an all-inclusive list, but non-starchy vegetables, starchy vegetables, fruits and greens are some great carbs, and then again, whole grain products with bread, flour, brown rice versus white rice, things like that. Then you've got soda, white pasta, white rice, and sugary cereal on the other side. So fibrous fruits and veggies, just with this chart again, small example size, are going to be better for you than those white foods. Then the other thing to make mention of with this as well, and something that we started doing, and when I say we, I mean my family, a few years ago, is we found that at places like Walmart and Viking, and different grocery stores, they have whole wheat pasta available instead of white pasta. So you're getting those servings of whole grains versus consuming a bunch of the white pasta. So pretty much everything they make, as far as spaghetti, elbow noodles, rotini, most styles anymore are made in a whole wheat option. They add some more flavor, in my opinion. And again, you're getting those quality grains. And if you think about cereals, if you love cereal, go for something like Cheerios versus Fruit Loops. Maybe it doesn't taste as sweet, but again, it's going to be a better option for you. Cheerios are heart healthy. They help reduce cholesterol. So there's another good plug for something like that that's a whole grain. The recommended daily intake of carbohydrates falls between 45 to 65% of your daily calories consumed. And carbs contain 4 calories per gram. So the way that those are calculated is if it would be based on a 2,000 calorie diet, carbs should range from 225 grams to 325 grams per day. So what you would do is you would take your daily calorie intake, so whether it's 1,400 or 1,500 or 1,600, wherever you fall in there, you would multiply that number by, let's say, 50%, and then divide it by 4. That is going to give you the total number of grams of carbohydrates you should consume per day. And again, this is variable, so it's not going to be the same for every single person. The number of carbs I consume each day will be different than the number of carbs that someone else consumes because bodies react in different ways. So what is nice is on MyFitnessPal, you can adjust this without having to do the math, but it's kind of fun to do it if you want to on your own. And you can tinker with those numbers between carbs, fats, and protein. They all have to equal, it has to equal up to 100%, but you can adjust those to find out what works best for you. So maybe you're somebody that does better with lower carbs and a higher protein daily intake. Or maybe, you are wanting to consume more fats through healthy fats. So you increase your fat and lower your carbohydrate intake. So there are different things you can find. There's tons of information online. Again, you could reach out to Val as well. I believe that she is happy to help, at least to a certain extent, with employees. So hopefully she doesn't get mad at me for saying that if a bunch of people reach out to her all at once. But again, that number is variable, but you do want to stay within that range. So you don't want to be consuming too few carbohydrates because, again, that's a primary source of energy. So not enough carbs, you're going to be sluggish. Your body is not going to be burning as many calories. So you want to make sure you're consuming the correct amount. Moving on to fats, and again, this is going to be a relatively brief presentation today just because we're covering kind of an overview of this stuff, but not getting real deep into it. So if you have questions on this one, please type them in the chat box and I'll get to them at the end of the presentation. Fats can get a bad rap. Dietary fats give your body energy and support cell growth, so they are important. You do need to consume fat each day. They also help to protect organs and keep the body warm. Now, where they vary is there are different types of fats. So we've got saturated fats, trans fats, monounsaturated fats, and polyunsaturated fats. So we've got 4 different categories. Now, across the board, all fats contain 9 grams per calorie. Daily recommended intake is 20 to 35% of your total calories. So again, based on the 2,000 calorie diet, you're looking at 44 to 77 grams of fat per day. Now, again, this is adjustable per person. You don't want to eat too few fats because, again, they are important in supporting the body and supporting cell growth. They do need to be consumed, but we want to make sure we're consuming the right types of fats. And this can really make a big difference in your weight loss journey. So we'll touch on that in just a moment. The same can be said for your equation here with calculating your fat grams as your carbohydrate grams. You would take your total daily calories and multiply it by a percentage that falls in that range, divide it by 9, and that gives you your recommended intake. Now, where this gets interesting as we move on is breaking it down into the 2 different fat categories. So we've got bad fats and we've got good fats. We're going to talk about the bad fats first here. Saturated fats and trans fats. These are mostly solid at room temperature. So examples of food that contain these fats are butter, margarine, shortening, beef and pork fat. And again, this is just a small list, so it's not all inclusive. If you think one that always pops into my head is like Crisco. It's essentially all fat and it's terrible for you. I don't know how many people cook with Crisco anymore, but for some reason that always pops into my head. Trans fats should be avoided. So we really don't want to eat any trans fats if possible. And saturated fats should be consumed sparingly. So too much of either of these fats can increase cholesterol, LDL, and actually reduce HDL, which is a number we want to see go up when we're talking about total cholesterol. So they do the exact opposite of what we want them to do. They make our bad cholesterol, which is LDL, increase, and our good cholesterol, which is HDL, decrease. Overconsumption of these can increase risk of heart disease as well as type 2 diabetes, and heart disease and type 2 diabetes pretty much go hand in hand. So if you're going down the path on one that's not necessarily family history related, they're very well possible going to be tied together. You want to again limit intake of saturated fats to less than 10% of your daily calories. So trans fats, again, we really don't want to consume any, so that's as little as possible. And a lot of companies are required to take trans fats out of their food, so that's great because they are terrible for you. And saturated fats are going to be there because, again, people cook with butter, people consume butter, especially in Wisconsin. It's a dairy product, but you do want to limit that intake to less than 10% of your daily calories. And you really want to, again, try to limit trans fats to as close to zero as possible. So based on a 2,000 calorie diet, less than 22 grams of fat per day should come from saturated fats. And it has been out there as well that you really should try to keep it to under 10 to 12 grams of saturated fat per day. Now, this can take some work. Again, this is where a lot of people who are working on getting into a healthy lifestyle routine, they'll say, and we see this with our Health for You program as well. People are meeting their calorie goal, but they're just not losing the weight, and they don't understand why. If they are consuming a certain amount of calories and they're exercising and they're burning calories that way, why they're not losing weight. So if you eat the wrong kinds of carbs and the wrong kinds of fats, it is going to impede your ability to lose weight because, again, your body will break down those carbs. Again, excess carbs is glucose, but the excess ones are stored as fat. And again, fat takes up more space than lean muscle mass. A pound of fat is much bigger than a pound of muscle. But when you're not eating quality fats, you're going to not see the results you want on the scale. And so I've seen this with people before as well, where they bring their food log to me, and we look that over, and the majority of their fats are saturated fats, and they're not getting enough healthy fats. We address that. We find ways to reduce that, and then in the next couple of weeks, they start to see the number on the scale go the correct way. So we really want to make sure, again, that we're consuming good fats. And our good fats are those unsaturated fats, monounsaturated and polyunsaturated. These can help reduce the risk of heart disease and lower cholesterol levels. So again, you need these fats. These are good for you to consume. And they can also increase HDL. So they essentially have the exact opposite effect of saturated and trans fats. Now, sources of these fats are a little bit different for each one. Monounsaturated fats can be found in olive, peanut, and canola oils, avocados, almonds, hazelnuts, and pecans. So a lot of sources for these fats are going to come from nuts. Avocados, I have never really been a huge avocado fan, but my wife is slowly working them into our daily diet. So we like to use avocados, and I can't really just eat them plain. But we'll take an avocado and we'll kind of finely slice it up and then spread it on a sandwich, like a deli sandwich, and it tastes pretty good that way. But that's one way that you can work in those healthy fats is by consuming those foods. Almonds, nuts, nuts are a very high fat content. So you don't need to eat a lot of them to get, number one, a lot of calories, and number two, a lot of fats. So you can overdo it with those, so you've got to be careful on that as well, but those are a great source. And then for polyunsaturated fats, sunflower, corn, soybean, and flaxseed oil. So if you typically cook with butter, try to replace it with one of these oils that are listed on here. It's going to do essentially the same thing. Now I know with baking and certain things like that, there are certain recipes that call for butter, and that's just what you have to use. I understand that. But if you're just trying to almost kind of a pan before you're going to prepare a dish. You don't need to use butter necessarily to do that because it doesn't necessarily add to the recipe. So I mean, I can remember, my grandma would cook. She'd just throw a chunk of butter in the stove on the pan just to grease it up so nothing stuck. So you don't have to do that. Fish is a great source of polyunsaturated fat, and fish is very healthy for you. Omega-3s are essential fats that you can only get from food items, so the body does not naturally produce that. So fish is a great source of omega-3 fatty acids. And then canola oil as well. So there are cooking oils that you can use that will add to that for you. So you don't need to necessarily, vegetable oil is really popular. Fried food, vegetable oil is used, and vegetable oil is not good for you. So substituting that with some of these other oils is a good way to add in some good fats. You want to aim to consume 15 to 20% of your daily calories from monounsaturated fats and 5 to 10% from polyunsaturated fats. So again, this takes that range, you can put this together however you want, that puts at least 25% up to 30% of your daily fat intake, or your fat intake, almost 100% of your fat intake in healthy fats. So that's what we're really aiming to do. Based on a 2,000 calorie diet, again, you're looking at 33 to 44 grams per day. And this, again, it's just like carbs, it's adjustable based on the person. So I'm not big on the fad diets, but stuff works for certain people, and I'm not going to tell you what you should and shouldn't eat unless you're eating, nothing but cake and ho-hos and stuff like that. Then you need to not do that. But if you have talked to a physician and the physician has recommended you to follow a certain style, whether it's Mediterranean or Atkins or something like that, that is for you to decide. I am not a dietitian. I'm not here to make that choice for you. The one caveat I will put with any of those diets is that they are hard to maintain. So people will go on a diet and they'll lose the weight they want, and then they stop and the weight comes back on. So it's much easier, or well, I shouldn't say easy, but over the long run, making positive lifestyle changes and choices with what you are eating. So not just completely cutting stuff out and then coming back and having it and then it comes back and everything goes the wrong way. Just knowing how to moderate certain things and then make healthier choices every day typically tends to work better for people in a longer lasting fashion, because some of those fad diets can be hard to maintain. Now, some people do and they have success with them, and that's great. So if you think you can do that, then wonderful. And I'm not going to tell you one way or another whether you should or shouldn't, because I don't have that background. So off of that spiel, let's move on to the next category here that we're going to discuss, and that is protein. Every single cell in the human body contains protein, and protein in its most basic form is made up of branched chain amino acids. It's essential in building and maintaining muscle mass, so you've got to consume protein every day to maintain the muscle mass you currently have. And if you want to build more, you need to consume more protein. It also helps the body repair cells and make new ones. So again, this is a building block that all cells and of course muscle goes off of. So it is extremely important. Commonly found again in animal products, nuts, and legumes. It helps to reduce appetite and hunger levels, which is great when we're looking at weight loss, because if it can help you feel more full throughout the day, you're going to be less likely to snack throughout the day. It can boost your metabolism and increase fat burning, so that's another big plus. It can help to lower your blood pressure. And again, it can help to maintain weight loss. So once you've gotten to a point where you're getting close to your target weight, or maybe you have hit your target weight down the road, making sure you're consuming enough protein to help you feel full will again help to prevent you from snacking too much. The daily recommended intake for protein is 0.8 grams per kilogram, or if we're looking at pounds, 0.36 grams per pound of body weight. So you don't need a ton for this average sedentary person. For the average sedentary male, it's 56 grams per day, 46 grams per day. I have a little typo there for the average sedentary woman. Increasing your protein consumption has been shown to help aid in weight loss. So I found this really interesting. But there's a 12-week study that found that women who increased their protein intake to 30% of their daily recommended calories ate on average 441 less calories per day and lost 11 pounds over that 12-week study. So consuming more protein can help with your weight loss. The kind of the daily recommendation is 10 to 35% of your daily calories should come from protein. Based on a 2,000 calorie diet, that would be 50 to 175 grams a day. And again, that's a basic conversion that you can do, or MyFitnessPal does it for you. So again, another shameless plug for MyFitnessPal. Use it to track. It is a really great tool. It can help you keep an eye on not only your calories, but your macronutrients as well. Now with protein, again, that daily recommended intake is just to maintain where you're at. So if you get to a point where you want to build some muscle, we're not talking about looking like Arnold Schwarzenegger, but if you are incorporating strength training into your weekly workout routine. So if you're strength training a couple days a week, your muscles need extra support with protein intake. So you want to make sure that you're consuming enough. So you're not going to be able to just consume that lowest range. You can move that to closer to 1 kilogram per gram per kilogram body weight, and really probably don't need to go too much higher than that. But all that information is out there for you to dig into a little bit deeper. And again, we want to make sure we are getting at least the minimum we need to maintain our muscle mass. So what is common with weight loss is people will see that they start losing weight, and you'll maybe do a body fat analysis, and you've found that you've lost more muscle mass than you have fat mass, typically because you're not consuming enough protein. So your body will break down muscle and convert it to energy if it's not getting enough through carbs, fats, and protein. So it's important to make sure you're consuming enough protein. Now, protein can be tricky. I have always struggled with consuming enough protein, mainly because I need to consume a lot of it because I'm a pretty big individual, and I have a pretty high calorie balance that I can consume each day. But again, when looking at wanting to build muscle mass, you have to consume more, so it can be tricky. And if you're someone who doesn't really like meat, that's when it can really get challenging. So these are just a few ways that you can make sure you're consuming enough protein, and there's other ways out there. But making sure to eat protein at each meal. So one easy example is if you eat a lot of cereal in the morning for breakfast, replace cereal with eggs. And if you're not a crazy fan of eggs, there are other ways that you can add protein by utilizing some other forms as well. But eggs is a great swap. Also has some healthy fats, so that's a really good swap for cereal, which is pretty much just carbs and sugar. So it's going to help keep you more full throughout the morning. When you go for a snack, go for things like cheese or Greek yogurt. Now, again, with dairy products, you've got to be careful because you don't want to consume too many saturated fats. But the protein content for cheese outweighs like the poor fats in that. So you can do that. Just again, make sure you're being mindful. Greek yogurt instead of traditional yogurt often has at least double or more of the protein content. Now, not everybody likes Greek yogurt. It can definitely take some getting used to because it is a thicker, richer, creamier texture than a standard yogurt, but it's not loaded with sugar. So if you don't like Greek yogurt, but you like yogurt, try to find an option that's not just crammed with sugar. So a lot of times people, they'll eat a Yoplait yogurt and like, oh, I had yogurt this morning for breakfast, I'm doing pretty good. Well, Yoplait has a ton of sugar in it, so you've got to really be careful with what you're picking there. One yogurt that I really like is the Dannon Oikos 000. Now you don't need, again, to cut out fat completely, but the 000 yogurt has no sugar and no fat. So that is an option that you can go for, and a cup of that has 15 grams of protein. So it's a really, really solid protein source. And if you're like me, and by the end of the day, you've consumed most of your fat calories, you don't really have anywhere to go to get protein without getting fat in your food. Like the 000 yogurt from Dannon is a good way to get some extra protein content. You can add protein-rich foods to a salad. So if you really like salad, there's ways to add it to that as well. Adding eggs, cold chicken, tuna, cheese, even chopped almonds are a great way to add some protein. Almonds not only are a good source of healthy fats, they're a great source of protein as well. So adding things like that into your salad, if you are a salad eater, is a good way to go. Now remember with salad, if you like dressing, some dressings are better than others, so you've got to be careful with that as well. A lot of people think I'm a weirdo because I don't like dressing, so I eat salad dry, which I know that a lot of people may be appalled by that, but I do. But adding things like eggs and chicken and tuna maybe not all in the same salad, are a good way to add some nutritional value. And even tuna as a snack, as weird as this may sound, I had a college professor that did this. He would buy the little bags of tuna and he would just eat those as a snack. So if you really like tuna, that's another thing that you could do. Um, Otherwise, there are protein supplements out there that you can utilize to support protein consumption. Now, I'm not going to go out and advocate for any of these because it's different for each person. Most protein supplements are not, they don't go through FDA approval, so you have to really be careful with what you buy and you've got to do a lot of research. There are some good ones out there that I've used in the past and I currently use. So if you have questions about that, I'd be happy to help you. But again, I'm not going to get into that too deep because they're not approved by the FDA. They don't follow those same standards. But what's nice about them is you can add them to a smoothie in the morning, or you can mix it just with water and milk and drink it that way. So, again, with a protein supplement, you want to look for one that's low in trans fat and low in overall fat, really. But they are a great source of protein. Typically, they'll contain from 20 to 25 grams of protein in a serving. Calories aren't bad. They're usually around 100 to 130 calories. But there is a lot of them out there, so you've got to kind of know what you're looking for. I really like to add them to smoothies in the morning. If you take some frozen blueberries and strawberries and maybe add in a banana, and then I like to use Greek yogurt again as a base for smoothies and add a little bit of skim milk or 1% milk. And then you add in a scoop of your protein powder. That really gives you a strong start to the day with protein. So those are all ways that you can add protein in to make sure you're consuming enough. And I know it seems, especially with women, that eating enough protein throughout the day is one point that's a struggle. So that's something that I've just seen in the past. So you want to make sure you're consuming enough, again, to at least maintain your muscle mass so that doesn't dwindle and go down as you're trying to lose weight. So takeaways from this presentation, again, this is generally just a brief covering of kind of what is in a carb and a fat and a protein. Again, this is a very, very large subject and we really could talk about it for a long time. But just kind of getting into it, you want to make sure you're consuming the correct amount of macros because this is going to help you achieve your weight loss goals faster. So again, you can hit your daily calorie recommendation and that's great, but if you're not paying attention to your carbs and fats and proteins, you're probably not going to lose the weight that you want to lose. So that daily calorie recommendation, again, is the starting point, but you combine that with accurate macros and you're only going to improve the goals that you're reaching towards. So make sure you pay attention to those. Calories are a great start, but pay attention to your macros. If you find you haven't been losing weight and you've consistently been going over your fats, that could be an answer for you right there. So look at those. Again, look at your saturated and trans fats. Make sure they're staying low. Try, if you can, to keep them, again, under whatever your 25% or whatever your fat is set up as on MyFitnessPal. Keep it under the recommended amount. Again, if you can keep it below 10 grams a day, that'd be great, and it may be lower for some of you as well. You can tinker with daily percentages to find out what works best for you. So I believe the default on MyFitnessPal is 50% carbs. I want to say it's 50 carbs, 30 fat, and 20 protein, or else it's 50, 25, and 25. So again, you can play with those, see what works best for you. Maybe you do better with a little bit higher fat consumption, a little bit higher protein consumption, and lower carb consumption. So you can play around with those sliders on there as well and find what works best for you and what makes you feel the best. And then just remember that not all carbs and fats are equal. So you've got to remember good versus bad. So instead of reaching for processed carbohydrates, which is again is that white bread, sugary cereal, white flour, white pasta, go for stuff that is whole grain because we got to get whole grain servings per day, and it's great for you. Go for the wheat bread. Go for wheat pasta, brown rice, things like that are going to be a quality source for you. And another one I forgot to mention, we just kind of started getting into this, is pita bread. That is excellent on sandwiches. And pita bread, especially a Greek style pita bread, is relatively low in fat, but it is another good quality source of protein. I think one pita of the Greek style pita bread is 6 or 7 grams of protein, depending on the brand that you buy. So that's another one you can throw in there, and it's whole grain, so that's another big perk. And then again, remember with those fats, go for good. So we want mono and poly unsaturated fats. If you don't remember anything else, remember that unsaturated fats are the ones we want to consume. Saturated and trans fat, we want as few as possible. And you don't need to eat 10 grams of saturated fat a day. There's nothing saying you have to have that. If you can keep that as low as you can and eat more of the good fats, then you're doing even better. So again, this takes us right to about 1 o'clock. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat section here. For those that are signed on for our live presentation, I'll make sure I get you marked down. And then I will talk to everybody again. And well, I see you throughout the week. So that is a plus there as well. So again, any questions, please leave them in the chat area. I'll leave that open for a little while. Otherwise, we'll see you guys a little bit later next week.